Welcome to Lewisham Unity, to a place where we gather to recharge, rest, and renew between one week and another, where we commit to shaping the future that we want to make, and where all of you, whoever you love, wherever you come from, wherever your ancestors come from, and whatever your spiritual path, whatever you're searching for, really, you are welcome here. And I'm Reverend Julio Torres. My pronouns are he, him. So, since my teens, I've always felt the greater spirit of the divine in nature. And in some ways, I've been an animist, believing that trees, roads, lakes, buildings, doors have spirits, to name a few. I once knocked over a bicycle and I was apologetic to it, and that's been my relationship with the divine in a nutshell. There have been times where I felt the divine walking along a country road, sometimes in the buildings of the architecture. More often than not these days in the visual arts, say like movies or paintings, video games, when I see acting. And, last night I was able to see Macbeth. And, I was reminded of a line where Lady Macduff in Act 4 says, "But remember now, I am in this earthly world, where to do harm is often laudable. To do good sometimes, counts as dangerous folly." And now this is a statement critiquing kind of justice and good and evil. And we may all encounter the divine spirit in nature, good and evil, and maybe just simple education. But today I bring up one particular person who was a mathematician who became a philosopher after encountering quantum physics and quantum mechanics. And this was in the early 20s. And he came out with some viewpoints that are not common in Christianity, but quite common in Eastern philosophies and spiritual traditions, say Buddhism, Taoism, and Hinduism. But to give a few points, I just want to give a quick shout out to Professor Javi Galindo's, who has a YouTube video which I think broke it down quite well. And so the mathematician is Alfred North Whitehead, and what he wrote was process theology or process philosophy. Now he starts off with saying that a lot of us, so this is Professor Galindo and his explanation, talking about this assumption of atoms. We have this model where we have like a nucleus that's kind of like a planet, and the electrons are kind of like a moon orbiting it, or maybe sun and planets kind of mentality. But he says this is not a correct model. Electrons actually kind of more pop in and out all over the place, in and out of existence, and they're actually quite far from the nucleus. And we don't know if these electrons are popping in and out actually end up being the same electron or a bunch of electrons. And this is kind of like a very basic physics way to say that nothing in nature can actually be determined in a simple kind of cause and effect analysis. That we're better off using probabilistic calculations. But to put that in a more spiritual context, the electrons are almost using choice, using freedom. And Professor G, which is his YouTube name in case you want to see any of his videos, says that this is not just a theory. This is common in electrical engineering and has been like kind of the foundation for the last 100+ years. And so this mathematician turned philosopher, Alfred North Whitehead, says that philosophers have this view on life, this kind of fallacy / error, something called misplaced concreteness, that nothing lasts forever. That reality isn't made up of objects, reality is actually made up of events. And if we look at everything in the long run, rivers change, rock erodes, and that might be from everything from water, from dust, from people stepping on a rock. If we think of reality as made up of events, we're in constant relationships with other events. A tree is not just a tree, it's the seed which it came from. It's the different stages of life. The root is not something separate from a tree. It's connected to the leaf. It's connected to this. Everything is interconnected. Everything is in a process of becoming. And so Whitehead then says that the universe are these events which relate to each other. It's not just a universe of nouns, of things. The universe is made up of verbs, made up of actions. And the universe is constantly fluctuating. The Big Bang wasn't actually something in the past. We are still in the Big Bang as the universe expands. This idea of interconnected existence was seen in Buddhism for thousands of years, and in Taoism also for thousands of years in terms of the constant flux of the universe. But to Western philosophy and Christianity, this is revolutionary, also heretical, depending who you talk to. But it's something for us to consider that we aren't human beings, we are human becomings. And so, with this in mind, Northhead then asks, well, what is God? God is indeed the ultimate process immersed in everything, hence process theology. The God is not just a being outside of time and space, some eternal now. And that was the common Christian contemplation, which started with the Christian saint Augustine of Hippo, who was African, Berber ethnically, but Roman citizen. The universe is a process from which greater complexity emerges. Particles become atoms, atoms become molecules, molecules become things like rocks or the planet. There's more diversity in life created as things go on, but yet somehow there's this order and unity to it. And through the chaos of everything, there are structures developed to allow for life as we know it. And therefore, God is not a grand ultimate being. God is a grand becoming. And so then we could think of certain characteristics, he says, of God. God is creative. God is in a constant relationship with existence. God is not coercive. Allows for free will, not forcing things. And then process theologians would say that God lures creation in with love. Now, this part may kind of sound like it comes out of nowhere. But with God being relational, God being creative, God urging relationships, we see evidence in humans as we're always searching for connection, always searching for love. Whether it be the love of family, the love of friendship, the love of intimate companionship. We have these desires to paint, to make music, to help with sickness. We have a natural empathy, which is true. Unless we have military training and or a particular hardship in life, that empathy is difficult to overcome unless one is naturally a psychopath or sociopath. And there's this classical theological question in Christianity. Can God be all powerful? Can God be all knowing? Can God be all loving? All at the same time. And process theologians would say yes, but with a caveat. God knows all the permutations, but God doesn't know what will be chosen. God hypothetically may be all powerful, but because of the allowing for freedom in all things, God doesn't know what's going to happen, but God also just kind of allows evil to take place because evil is a choice. And God is actually all loving, at least hoping that beings, dare I say, all becomings, take the option of love. And there's these events and these relationships, and people can choose to ignore that divine Lord. But again, suffering is not strictly just God's fault. Yeah, there's natural disasters, but most of the time it's people causing suffering. And that's a lot. I'm done with the academics. But that is a condensed version of a mathematician writing philosophy. So help me again. I'm heard it was dense. I refuse to read it. There are whole groups of theologians that are pulling from this, and I'll try to grapple with them. Again, being overly academic is not my style, but I think you have to come to grips with some of the basics. And I found process theology quite refreshing when I was in seminary, being able to co-create a universe. That God is relational and the universe is relational. For me personally, I settled on pantheism as a model for God. And I lean towards justice this oriented theology of liberation theology, that I believe God wants us all to be free from oppression. And yet it is because of process theology that I believe God is this creative spirit of the universe, which resides or is encompassing of each of us. And again, globally not news. Again, Eastern philosophies had it in various bits and fashions, but in the Western society, for philosophy to bring in this kind of social aspect, to bring in God not trying to be perfect, I think is a beautiful thing we should all recognize, or at least engage with spiritually. If we think of prayer, for example, the classical thing is us praying petition to a Lord, at least in England. But in this case, we could think of prayer maybe as a dialogue, rather than some requests for spiritual nobility to be hearing us. God is not just a domineering parental overlord figure, but more of a loving figure. God as a partner, God as a friend, God as an intimate partner. You can be your whole self and remind yourself maybe of what things you desired as a childhood or as a teenager, and what then you had to get rid of because you had to adopt to society's ways. But how can we change society? How can we live in love? Hating, warfare, greed, these are choices. So how can we then choose to change the world? But how does process theology help with your spirituality? And there's some questions you can contemplate. Of course, maybe you're ready to do. Head of the game, well done. What has been done for so long, for as long as you can remember, that actually it don't literally got to be that way? How would you change it? In your spiritual practices, where do you feel freedom to do things? Or maybe from the opposite, what spiritual practices do you find constrictive and why? Is it because you've made the decision that you feel they have to be that way? Or does someone force rules on you? Emotionally speaking, do you feel love from the universe? If not, what about from your inner depths, from your inner becoming? Or maybe then we should ask the question, what sources of love do you have? And how will you add to love in your life? If someone tells you there's a right way to do things, do you feel there could be a different, more loving way to do things? In times of pain, do you feel there's an ultimate grieving with you? In times of joy, do you feel the divine celebrating with you? If you're dancing, if you're playing music, you're solving a problem, you're just waking up in the morning, pick any mundane activity. Where is the divine? And if the divine is not there, what is in fact blocking your sight? Because process theology says the divine is in relationship. So how can you build that relationship in everything you do, with everything you encounter, every person you encounter? I believe God wants us to co-create a beloved community of abundance, peace, and equality, counteracting all those evils of poverty, militarism, and forms of discrimination, sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, just to name a couple. But I believe also God wants us to have a bit of fun, to explore creations. God wants us to be in relationship with each other, with our human creations. Be in relationship with a computer, be in relationship with your table, be in relationship with all the sources of the material and nature, with your ancestors, be in relationship with the future descendants of humanity. I believe we are the manifestation of the divine. Whether we're connecting to our deepest selves, we're connecting to each other, nature. These are all gateways to the holy, to the sacred, to that venerable essence of the universe. And we can choose to consecrate the world with every small choice we make. We can bless, we can provide spiritual energy, so many things of a positive fashion we can with the world. So build your relationships, build love. But continue to ask the question, because that's where the creativity comes in. And that's my spiel. I thank y'all for listening.